so excited to be able to welcome you to our beautiful campus in Hull for the first time, and especially to have you be a part of this fourth edition of the festival. I usually like to start by asking you just really the simplest of questions. What is your name? What is your job title? And what does that entail?
Thank you, Philippe, for having me. It's so great to be here. My name's Meg Chamberlin, and I use the pronoun she, her. Right now, I actually have two job titles. I am the founder of a new consulting firm called Meg Chamberlin Peace Building, which we'll talk about. And I'm also a principal on call still for the Sunshine Coast District, which is a school district out on the west coast of Canada.
From my very limited understanding, different titles, roles. What does the consulting entail, and what does the on-call head entail?
Yeah, the principal on call is really supporting the district with there's 14 different schools across the district. So I support when the principals are out. I used to be the vice principal of the largest high school on the Sunshine Coast, and I stepped back from that role to launch the consulting. So, and in that principal role, it's great. I know the students, I know the teachers, and I'm in supporting the day-to-day operations of the high school. And I love it still because I was 20 years in education in the classroom and then 6 years leading schools as principal or deputy head. And this still gives me the opportunity to be in schools and see the day-to-day of what students and teachers are dealing with, while also working on the consulting. And the consulting is really, 20 years in the making. And I am now working with schools globally to support the implementation of restorative practices, essentially helping to build peace in schools. So I work with schools to support community building practices, to support conflict resolution that is effective and harm repair, so that we can have students being in schools that are feeling safe and where they're able to thrive and be successful, not just academically, but also personally. And in my big hope in the world that they'll be peace builders as we move forward.
It's so interesting listening to you describe the two roles because, of course, they are intrinsically tied to education, to the classroom, to the relationship that a student, a learner has with their professor, with their teacher, but also with the kind of environment that surrounds every learner and every student, right?
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, did you always know that you wanted to work in education? Or was it kind of something that you realized along the way?
That's a great question. I think I've always worked with young people, but I did not know I wanted to work in education. I was a camp counselor growing up in Ontario. We have great lakes, and I spent a lot of time on the water and the waterfront with kids. So 11 of my summers growing up were at camp. And then I moved across the country. I loved skiing. I loved chemistry. Also, I put those two things together and went to the University of British Columbia for my chemistry degree. And when I finished, I honestly did not know what was next. And my thought was, I need to go explore. So I spent almost 3 years with a backpack on, traveling around Europe, around Southeast Asia, around Latin America. And in that time, I had some really interesting opportunities to work in humanitarian development, especially in Central America. And part of that was working in a school that had just been started that was really trying to bring students, give them a place to be in a very, very socioeconomically challenged area. And that was the first time I joined these two lines of peace building, of humanitarian development and education. And it was from South America that I actually hand wrote my application to my Bachelor of Education degree to become a teacher. So that's how I got into the classroom. And then since then, my path has weaved really always crossing with community engagement. So you mentioned relationship and the environment that our students are in. I think I've been so impacted by travel, by exposure to others with different cultures, different ways of living, different ways of being, that I always wanted to provide that opportunity for my students. And I found different ways to do that. And right now I've really gone back to the local, to what is our day-to-day impact on our students, and what are our students' impacts on each other. Like, we have these huge bodies of, numbers of students in schools, and we often don't draw on their capacity to build community as much as we could. So that's what I'm trying to help schools do.
And then presumably, is this the same topic you'll be talking about at EduFest? What can the attendees expect to hear about when you're here?
So we're going to be really looking at the practical tools of restorative practice. So restorative practice is a social science looking at how we connect to each other, how we build connection, how we maintain connection, how we deal with conflict, how we feel seen in environments that we're in. So we're really going to look at practical tools of community building circles, and we use those to create norms, like essential expectations in the classrooms. We use those to discuss ideas, to reflect on conflict, to think about what kind of environment we want to be in and what role we have in it. And students can lead circles, faculty can lead circles. These circles can be staff and students together. So it's really a way of bringing people together in a equal setting. And then we're also going to look at fair process, which is how we deal with harm. So, students are learning. We're all learning. We all make mistakes. And so in an environment where we're trying to support young people in when they make mistakes, knowing that they still belong, that we will support their growth, we're going to look at how we can support fair process. So really engaging all of those folks that were involved if there has been a challenge, and then working towards a resolution that will be effective and longer term. And then we're going to look at something called the effective questions, which are a series of quite formulaic questions, to be honest, that help when a student has caused harm or when there's been a mistake that's been made. And it's really systematic, asking what happened, what were you thinking at the time, what are you thinking now, who has been impacted, and what needs to be done to make things right. And through using those questions, I'm going to be working with students and staff at EduFest. We're going to be able to really grab hold of our ability to impact conflict resolution in schools.
I hope this doesn't come across as controversial, but some people might say, well, it just sounds like it's going to be a lot of talking. If someone in their mind, they hear restorative practice and they think, well, it's a kind of a different shape to therapy, or it's a different form of just talking things out, I don't need it. I don't have the time for it. That's not going to be effective. What would you say to someone that doesn't believe, someone that has that hesitation and thinks, I'm better off going to a different session when Meg's going to be speaking because I really don't think I have the time for this, or this isn't going to work?
I appreciate that question. And it really actually points to one of the common misconceptions about restorative practice, and that is that it is a really soft method of dealing with discipline or student behavior. And I think, first of all, this session is super practical. I love, obviously to talk about the things that I'm passionate about, but I know, having been a learner, having been a leader, a principal, working with staff, that we don't learn from talking. We learn from being in it, from doing. So we're going to be in the circles. We're going to be looking at role plays. We're going to be using the effective questions with scenarios that are like the top 10 most common challenges that schools face. And the bottom line is schools face these challenges, every single one, because we're raising young people. And so if we're not managing conflict or challenge between two students, or even staff-student challenges in a way that honors the individual's experience while still respecting accountability, then we actually can cause more harm to our community. We can leave conflicts unresolved. We can leave students feeling isolated, especially with quite a common methodology of suspensions, of removing students from schools when something goes wrong. And so it's not about eliminating discipline or eliminating consequence, not at all. It's actually bringing that to the forefront and having a common conversation around it. And the cool thing about this, I was actually just at a student leadership conference a couple of weeks ago here in Vancouver, and I worked with students. We did a practical workshop where we learned these skills. And those students are going back to their schools in these few weeks and leading these types of activities. So it's direct, right away. People can walk out with tools and use them and practice and see how it works and adjust how they need to within their context.
So it sounds actually like it's a lot about kind of self-agency in a way, both as much for the teachers as it might be for the students, and kind of taking stock really of, or rather gaining awareness also, right, of your own role in some of these conflicts, but also of your own role and agency in being part of the solution or part of the resolution in some of these situations, right?
Yeah, at the core of it is exactly that, a sense of accountability. And what we do when we provide students this opportunity is we give them an opportunity to develop empathy, to really understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, without carrying that burden, right? Because, and especially as leaders and teachers, we have to be careful of empathy overload, of really, we take on so much in terms of relationship. So this is about understanding and helping to engage in understanding someone else's experience, taking accountability both as a learner and as a school, because we do have hold of our students for so long during the day, and we do influence the interaction that they have on others so much. So it's really just taking responsibility for that and doing it in a way that is thoughtful and explicit, rather than hoping it will work out.
Crossing your fingers and just hoping for the
Yeah.
best, right? Yeah. I like the fact that it's more active.
Mm.
And so it makes me think when you're not thinking about restorative practice, or where you're not working on your consultancy or working on conflict resolution, um, what does Meg Chamberlin do to recharge and reconnect? Do you have any hobbies? Is there something that you love to spend your time doing to kind of recharge your batteries? Is there maybe reading, music? I don't know. Tell us a little bit about what you do outside of this very important work that you do, but hopefully it's not the only thing that you do.
Yes, I've definitely got better at that balance. There were definitely years where it was not as good, but I love the West Coast of, being in the West Coast of Canada, and I used to live in Switzerland as well, in Verbier. And it won't surprise you to know, if I lived in Verbier, that I love skiing. So I ski a lot. I love to travel to ski. I actually just got back from Japan for the first time skiing there. So that's one of my big winter activities. I'm also a yoga instructor, so I keep myself fit and happy through yoga now, in my own practice. I have a dog and a family that I love to spend time with, so we're out in the mountains and hiking. And then I also love music. I'm a child of my era, and I like electronic music. I also really into the Midnight right now, and Rufus du Sol. So those are some of the ways that I relax. I'm trying to learn the guitar, and I've been saying that for 20 years. So
But I think the
I'm
operative word
3/4
is
in
you're
the truth.
trying.
Yeah, I'm trying. I
You're
keep
having it
trying.
out.
I
Yeah.
keep getting a little bit better every year. It's not super impressive, not something you'd want me on stage for, but I do love it. I love the expression of music. And I'm doing a bit of writing these days too. I haven't, nothing published recently, although, I have done some significant research writing in my past, but I'm exploring that again as a way to express and to communicate. So it's fun.
Sounds like you spend a very little time in front of a screen.
Yeah, it's a good point. Actually, I do try to get away from the screen. I don't watch a ton of TV. I'm enjoying actually rewatching some of Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown, getting into some cooking. And also I love it. It crosses those pathways I mentioned of understanding different cultures and seeing the influence of food and gathering in different cultures. So I like.
Even chemistry to some extent.
Yes, totally. It brings it all together. But it's true that I don't spend a lot of time in front of the screen outside of work.
In your domain of conflict resolution and restorative practice and all the rest, I think obviously it's a very important subject in education in general, but it feels like in the world at large, especially right now, and through your own journey, and you have witnessed and you have experienced actually the beauty and the richness that comes from diversity, from different cultures, from that meeting point actually of the differences. And instead of pointing the finger and wagging the finger at people who are different than us, actually perhaps embracing and in fact celebrating those
Mhm.
differences. So is there anything else any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience today?
I really appreciate the way you frame that. I agree. I think that we're in a space in the world where if we look around, we can see we need to do something differently. Our young people, I believe, I always have the whole time I've been in education, have immense power to build a more peaceful world than we have right now. So I think my message to end would be that it's simpler than it feels, in that we can make small incremental changes that make a massive difference in the way that students feel and therefore engage with others in their learning environment. And it can feel restorative practice is not another program or an add-on. It's an approach to authentic relationship. So it's not about building another program or making time for a new thing. It's about weaving small changes into the way we communicate with students and the way they communicate with each other. And as I mentioned before, just being explicit that we're not leaving it to chance. We're not leaving it to the algorithm that our students are on social media with. We're actually providing them the tools that they can feel good about going out into the world, interacting with people of all different ideas, learning from them, engaging with them, disagreeing with them, but in a respectful and ethical way. So that's what I hope, is that we know that even small changes can make a really big difference. And I hope that everybody who, I meet and attends a session at EduFest, well, even if they go away with one small thing, I know that over time, that will make a really positive impact.